I want to get to the detail of what Nigel Farage had to say in just a few moments, but just in terms of, let's just go through the things that he says he wants to do. He wants to basically detain all illegal boat arrivals once he is in office. No bail, no right of appeal. So the people who arrive, and presumably people who are, already in the hotels and in the houses of multiple occupancy. I mean, I don't believe we're going to get all those people out of hotels in the next 3 years or 4 years, that they would then be put into detention centres ready to be deported. Do you think that itself is possible?
Well, so I would split the new arrivals from those already here, Julia. I think it's certainly feasible for new arrivals to do that, but we need to start pouring concrete now, and we need to start changing our legislative framework now, because as you know, at the moment, they come in through Manston, which is only a short-term holding facility by and large, and we can only hold them there for 24 hours, and that's why they're ending up in communities, hotels and so on. I do think we do need to detain everybody who comes on a small boat. I think we could do that at Manston if we could get the planning permission. We could have a short-term and a long-term hold. When I was an immigration officer back in the day, that's exactly what we did, Julia. We used to find illegal immigrants, detain them and remove them from the territory upon the authority of a chief immigration officer. So I think there's something about the detention estate. We've been done time and time again by inspections at various places, haven't we? You name it, any accommodation centre, any detention centre, Napier Barracks, the Bibby Stockholm. Someone's come along and said, we can't keep them here for one reason or another. We need to get around all of that stuff and say we will detain them, and they will be detained in secure accommodation pending deportation. But we haven't got the spaces right now. We've got to start doing that. I'd do it at Manston. The Home Office own that site. They could stay there. We could arrest people, attack them at Manston, and then I would remove them swiftly.
And how many people could you house there? I mean, again, if we're not talking, one of the issues with detention centres we previously had, when it was much smaller numbers, was that people's asylum claims and appeal were taking months and months on end. And the argument was, well, you can't keep these people in these conditions for months on end. But these are conditions that would be perfectly acceptable to keep people in for a few weeks, say.
Yeah, so we've got short-term holds for 5 days, and we have longer-term holds for those. That's how it's split. It shouldn't take that long to remove people from the territory, provided he does all the things he says he's going to do with the legal framework, which is massive, Julia, because he's talking about demurring from all of the international conventions that we're subject to. As I say, we used to do this back in the 70s, but ever since then, our laws have been actually penetrated by interpretations of the Asylum Convention, the Human Rights Convention, the Torture Convention. In fact, an immigration officer right now, if they arrest someone either at the border or inland, they're going to have to let them go pretty well straight away, because a lawyer's going to come in and lodge some sort of a complaint. Now, you've got to get on. How you can do that then? You've got to be very, very bold in your legislation, and you've got to say, right, from day one, if we get elected, from day one, we are going to repeal. We're going to strip back all of the legislation to the original Immigration Act 1971. We will not entertain an asylum application, a human rights application, or any other application under international law from anybody who comes from a safe country like.
Won't that itself be challenged under the human rights legislation, though? That's the problem.
It's going to get. I don't know what it's going to do with the House of Lords.
Well, again, there is an element. I mean, people say the House of Lords is part of the establishment. I mean, look, you've got the blob. You've got way more blob than that around as the House of Lords. But the House of Lords, if this was a manifesto commitment, and if reform won a big majority, or any majority at all, they would not constitutionally, conventionally wise, be able to actually stop that, but they could delay it a long time.
Yeah, but we had that with Rwanda, and look what happened. I mean, there was 2 years of filibustering in the Lords. They sent it back time and time again. The Sunak government weren't bold enough. They didn't listen to Suella Braverman and Rob Jenrick on some of the amendments they were putting forward. They were on the right lines, but you have to give the Immigration Service and the Border Force the powers and the authorities they need to arrest, detain and deport. It's no good saying you're going to do it and having an announcement politically if as soon as we start doing it, the lawyers jump in again. And we cannot put the Home Secretary in contempt of court. We have to act within the law.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be very simple and straightforward to most of us. The trouble is, of course, we are looking at the scale and particularly also the amount of time that people might need to be held. Now, if there was a change in the law, so as they were proposing, that basically, if there was a change in the law under the Tories, if you arrive by this boat route, that makes you a criminal. It's already illegal to do that. But they basically want to make a new offence. It's illegal entry. If you arrive illegally, you can never claim asylum. asylum. You will not be an option open to you. So you don't need to have an appeal or anything like that. It's not an option, not going to happen. Do you think some of those simple changes in the law, that they make the crucial difference? Or do you actually think that for the people who are coming here, the gangs who are telling them, oh, you know, it's come to the land of milk and honey in Britain, that they would actually have to see it on their mobile phones themselves in the Calais camps, that these people were, and back home in Somalia or wherever, that these people were not going to be able to stay. They're in a camp, they're not working, for Uber and Deliveroo, and they're being deported home.
Yeah, exactly. There are already provisions in the current laws to exclude people from the asylum system if they've come from a safe third country. But a lot of that's being unpicked by this government because they've just repealed the Illegal Migration Act. And that's the main purpose of this current legislation, is to unpick Rwanda and give us that and say everybody will be allowed to claim asylum. But that's not a given, Julia. I mean, there have been precedents where we can say, well, actually, if you've come from a safe country, you're not going to be admitted into our asylum system. What we have done, though, is always allowed it in our human rights system and into our torture convention. So what Farage is going to have to do is to find a way of getting around that and saying, well, actually, you're not going to be in. Now, there will be huge opposition to that. You will get callers going nuts about this from the left, saying you can't do that. This is international law. You're tearing up our own legal constitutional principles. So it's a massive, massive undertaking. But I think it's feasible. I think it's doable with a very, very bold approach from a new government and one that demonstrates we are removing people when they come off a boat. And you guys need to be out there filming that.
Yeah.
So when they go back, that message will get across then. So there's no point me going, if I'm going to end up in Rwanda or back home, I'm going to stay in Calais, right?
Yep. That
is the removals deterrent that I've been advocating from day one. We need a removals deterrent. At the moment, we haven't got one. The messages that are going back on the WhatsApp groups, on Instagram, are saying, just get in a boat, get over here and look, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, and they're quite right, because you can stay here. And in terms of the actual deportations, now what they're saying is, we'll have voluntary deportations and we'll give you $2,500 and a free flight, but you go, because that's actually, you think, well, why are we doing that? Well, because it costs a heck of a lot less. I mean, by a lot less to do it that way. But if not, we will forcibly detain you. We are going to deport you. We are talking about people being, dragged, kicking and screaming in handcuffs up the plane steps. Are we going to have the planes, the crew willing to take them? And are the countries we try and take them to going to be willing to take them? And is there an issue for you about deporting people to countries like Afghanistan, like Syria, like Iran?
Well, I would go for the twin track option of having removal to the source country. That might be places like India, Pakistan, Vietnam. You look at the cohorts, these are countries that generally speaking are safe. Yeah. There may be individual cases who say, well, I'm a member of this group or that group, but you could say it's feasible to return to those countries. For the much harder countries like Syria, Iran, Iraq, these people may well have a genuine claim for asylum, but it doesn't mean they have to stay here. They could go to somewhere like Rwanda and make a new life. And that's why I was a big advocate of the Rwanda plan, a bit like Operation
If it was on scale, though, not with a couple of hundred people.
No, I know, but I think that deterrent, we'll never know now whether that deterrent would have worked. But I think that was a really good move to say, look, you're not going to get to stay here. You're not getting into us. If we can't send you back to France, they won't have it, apart from this 1 to 17 deal or whatever it is. We can't send you back to your own country because it's being ruled by a bunch of complete, despots who will treat you badly. That's what the legal framework will say. Well, then we're going to send you to another country. And I went to Kigali a couple of times. It's a lovely place, Rwanda. It's really nice. They want people to come, and the only thing they said is, we don't want your criminals, actually, thank you.
Yeah, the thing is, we don't want them, and no one wants them. That's the thing, we're stuck with our own ones, let's not import them. Can I ask you, as someone who's worked, a senior figure at the UK Border Force, there's been a lot of talk about how we shouldn't scapegoat migrants. Now, again, there's a difference between legal migrants and illegal migrants, people who overstay and people who don't. But in terms of the illegal migrants, those who are arriving by the small boats, smuggling the back of the lorry, that's still an issue as well. And people who are getting here on dodgy visas, fake visas and the like. What is the level of criminality in your considerable professional experience? Because not every single one of these men is a rapist or a child abuser or the like, but we have seen that a scale of criminality, allegations and proven convictions, there's court cases going on right now, which are very troubling for people.
Yeah, what troubles me is that we just don't know when they come to us, Julia, who they are or what their criminal backgrounds are. We can do an Interpol check, we do a biometric check, but you never know if somebody is coming from a place where they've done something dreadful, or also whether they're, they come from a culture which, has a completely alien culture to ours in terms of the treatment of women and children. And when released in the community without proper training and proper education, can misbehave and find themselves falling foul of the local community. So, I mean, we really need to thoroughly vet and screen everybody, and that goes back to detention again. Not same day 24-hour throughput with 1,000 a day. We need to have them for a good period of time where we have experts talk to them, look at them, analyse them, and determine whether or not they're suitable for temporary admission in the first place. So I would want to do that, but I think the key to all of this is as they say, detain them, and the premise, the standard process will be you will be removed from this country because you have entered illegally. That is not an unreasonable premise. It's something I worked on for a great many years, and it's perfectly practical. And I'm sure immigration enforcement and border force will be very happy to implement those rules, but they need the legal framework, and that's what we've done.
You say things that's doable, but you need to be bold. Nigel Farage has already, in some comments today, sort of rode back on some of his comments about people ask, are you going to deport women and children as well? Now we know that the vast majority are young men, but speaking today, he said that was not his plan. He said, I was very, very clear yesterday in what I said, that deportation of illegal immigrants, we're not even discussing women and children at this stage. Asked if women and children would be exempt from deportation, he said, I didn't say exempt forever, but at this stage it's not part of our plan for the next 5 years. Although yesterday he did say they would be detained, but the priority for deportations would be adult males. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone would agree with that, wouldn't they?
Well, most of our detention estate is only capable of holding adult males, Julia.
Yeah.
There is a very small facility at Yarl's Wood which does hold females. We're not allowed to detain families, actually. That's been outlawed for some years now. So we would have to review all of that in terms of how we keep in touch with them. And I'm not saying bail should be ruled out entirely for everybody. I mean, there may be certain cases we say we'll have reporting restrictions or some other, in-country monitoring systems to look after, to ensure people stay in touch. But I think the big problem that we're all talking about here is a very, very significant number, a very large number of working age males who we don't know who they are, who are simply walking into our country through a very brief vetting process and staying here indefinitely. I think that's the problem we're going to reverse. And in order to do that, you need to be really, really bold in terms of your detention policy and in terms of your removals policy.
And clearly also, given we're told, correct me if I'm wrong, that 90% of these men don't have documentation on them, whether or not they've thrown it away, they've given it to it's been taken by the people smugglers so they can use that, to get them to work for them and the like. But I mean, if we don't know who someone is, we can't vet them.
Well, that's why they throw their passport. People say, why do they throw their passport? The passport tells you a story, Julia. It tells you who they are, how old they are, what country they've come from, what countries they've been to. A whole raft of stuff that's really useful for us, and they throw that away deliberately to give us another story. Actually, they don't necessarily tell you who they are, where they're from, or where they've been, because that don't suit them. The smugglers train them in what to say to defeat border control. So we need to find a way around that.
Okay.
It's an offence to enter this country without an entry clearance. That's why they're illegal entrants. They're entering in breach of the immigration laws, and they could be detained. But the fact is that as soon as we detain them, then there will immediately be access to a lawyer, a solicitor who will apply for bail, and will know my client has got a claim of human. And we don't know whether they have or haven't, and we can only go by what they say because there's no third-party evidence such as a for us to rely on, and that's the problem.
And you said to me before that actually one of the solutions that this Labour government is looking at is of course, they're going to deal with the backlog. We've got 180,000 in the backlog now, something like that, and they'll deal with that by basically letting people stay. But they perhaps won't be all given asylum. I think half the people who arrive on the boats have already they've applied for and failed to get asylum in other European countries, but they're given sort of indefinite leave to stay anyway. How does that work?
Well, they're granted exceptional leave to remain outside of the asylum system, Julia, because it's simply too difficult to remove them for one reason or another. But
then they go off that sort of particular cost in the Home Office. So then they just go on the benefits list.
Well, they are then, if they've got indefinite leave if they've got exceptional leave to remain, then they're on Code 1. That means they can work. That means they're entitled to everything we're entitled to. Doesn't mean they're going to be allowed to stay forever. I mean, what they're saying, maybe in 5 years' time, in a regime change in your country, we could send you back. But for the next 5 years, you can stay.
But we rarely do.
You're either going to get asylum or ELTR once you come off a boat. That's basically what's happening. You could grant your way out of this, Julia. That's what they could do. They could say, well, all this what do we mean by processing cases quickly?
Yeah.
Well, It's very quick to grant one. I could do that now.
Yeah.
You could do that now. Just stamp a
Waiver
passport.
one, then we've got no asylum backlog, no problem at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. But then what's happening to all the people? Well, they're all still in the communities. They're still putting pressures on your welfare state, your housing, your National Health Service. So people need to understand what's going on. And that is what is happening. You know, if you're granting your way out of this, then people need to have that.
Absolutely. Can I ask you, I mean, one of our guests earlier, and I know we've got a caller who wants to talk about this as well, James Ball, is sort of, you know, very pro, I would say this to sort of Ramona rather than even a Remainer. And he says, look, all these problems we've got, this massive number of people who've arrived in this country and our inability to deport them, it's all because of Brexit. You're the expert, is it?
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Look up the figures. Dublin Convention. That was the EU agreement for third-party asylum removals. We ended up taking more people in under the Dublin Convention than we ever removed, mainly back from Ireland, actually. More intake than output. We only ever removed about 50 cases to France in my entire experience of the Dublin Conventions, because the fact is you had to prove that they claimed asylum in that third country. And how do you prove that? Unless they're going to give you a Eurodac hit, or they're going to tell you the only ones that ever played ball were the Germans and the Dutch. We got a few there, and in the early days, Italy and Greece. But then the EU woke up and said, well, we're not going to tell the Brits that this person's claimed asylum here, are we? Because you know what's going to happen.
We're going to get them back. Very interesting to have you prepare that. And just finally, we've got this one in, one out policy, and we're told that, you know, people have been detained already for that. But now it could be scuppered by the fact that, in terms of like stopping the boats, partly because the French government may fall. What are your concerns there?
I've always said that if we could get a safe third with France and send them back to France, that is plan A. That's perfect, if the French would take them back.
Yeah.
So give him credit for the first time. He's right. In my experience, and I was in the department for 40 years, and 20 years of that dealing with French asylum applications, they never ever would take anybody back. And we had a gentleman's agreement. If someone turns up from New Haven from Dieppe and didn't have a passport, didn't claim asylum, then we still got a gentleman's agreement. But anyone coming on a small boat, the French have never ever said no, we'll have them back, right? So that is a fact. So to say we're even going to take one back is what is fair, but one is they need to tip that tipping point. It don't be 1 or 20 or 30. It be thousands. If we start seeing thousands going back across the channel, then we might be able to tip it that way. And I would even accept something in return. I would accept something in return.
But it ain't going to happen, is it? Tony Smith, I know you've got to go. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.